Breaking news tonight, Brett Kavanaugh breaking his silence, his wife by his side, the embattled Supreme Court nominee hitting back.
I'm not going anywhere.
Kavanaugh defiant as a second accuser comes forward to allege sexual misconduct. Also the wild all-day drama swirling around the man overseeing Mueller. Rod Rosenstein summoned to the White House, reports he'd be fired or resign. Now the cliffhanger. What will happen when he meets face-to-face with the president? My exclusive interview with the president of Iran, what he just told me about a potential meeting with President Trump. Bill Cosby in court, a judge set to sentence a disgraced icon facing the rest of his life behind bars. Parents outraged as a school bus driver is caught on camera letting kids as young as 11 drive the bus. News tonight for everyone who's complained about the ever-shrinking legroom on planes and the amazing new treatment helping paralyzed people who were told they'd never get out of a wheelchair, now taking steps for the first time.
I would characterize it as breathtaking.
The video you have to see.
This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
Good evening. It was a day of split-screen dramas in Washington. This morning, President Trump defending his Supreme Court pick in the face of a new sexual misconduct allegation when all of a sudden reports rolled in of an entirely different bombshell about to land. This one, that Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, the man overseeing the Mueller-Russia investigation, was about to be out of a job. We'll get to where that story leaves off in a moment. But first to Judge Brett Kavanaugh, taking to television with his wife tonight after that new allegation. This one from a woman who says Kavanaugh exposed himself at an alcohol-fueled party when they were in college. NBC's Peter Alexander starts us off tonight.
Dignity.
Tonight, embattled Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh, alongside his wife Ashley, vowing he will not withdraw.
I'm not going anywhere.
That following a second accuser coming forward.
I'm not going to let false accusations drive us out of this process, and we're looking for a fair process where I can be heard and defend my integrity, my lifelong record.
The new allegation from 53-year-old Deborah Ramirez, one of Kavanaugh's classmates at Yale. Ramirez telling The New Yorker during a drunken dorm room party in 1983 or 84, when both she and Kavanaugh were freshmen, Kavanaugh exposed himself to her. Ramirez, who acknowledges she'd been drinking to the point of being foggy and slurring her words, saying, "I was embarrassed and ashamed and humiliated." That she remembers Kavanaugh next to her pulling up his pants. Brett was laughing. I could still see his face. The New Yorker reporting it has not confirmed with other eyewitnesses that Kavanaugh was present at the party, and that two of the male classmates who Ramirez alleged were involved, and the wife of a third, all dispute Ramirez's account.
Judge Kavanaugh is an outstanding person, and I am with him all the way. I think it could be, there's a chance that this could be one of the single most unfair, unjust things to happen to a candidate for anything.
With protesters rallying against Kavanaugh on Capitol Hill and Democrats demanding the FBI investigate, Senate Republicans tonight announcing an up or down vote on Kavanaugh in the near future. Meanwhile, Kavanaugh's first accuser, Christine Blasey Ford, who alleges Kavanaugh sexually assaulted her when they were both in high school, preparing to testify this Thursday. In a recent letter to Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley, just obtained by NBC News, Ford writes, "While I'm frightened, please know my fear will not hold me back from testifying," saying she felt agony, yet urgency, and a civic duty to come forward. Kavanaugh responding in that interview with Fox News.
I'm not questioning, I have not questioned that perhaps Dr. Ford at some point in her life was sexually assaulted by someone in some place. But what I know is I've never sexually assaulted anyone.
And Lester, tonight, Kavanaugh insists that he never attended any party like the one Ford describes. And in a letter to the Senate committee, he blasts the allegations against him as smears, part of what he calls a frenzy to come up with anything to block his confirmation.
All right, Peter Alexander, thank you, Peter. Now to the fate of Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein and what looked a lot like an episode of The Apprentice. For several hours today, it looked like the man overseeing the Russia investigation was on his way out. Tonight, he still has a job, but his future is uncertain as he awaits a meeting with the president. Our justice correspondent Pete Williams reports.
A heart stopping mourning after Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General, headed for work in what was supposed to be a routine White House meeting. Suddenly, word came that he was on his way to resign, some administration officials said, but others said he'd never quit, he'd have to be fired. By day's end, President Trump in New York for UN meetings said they'd meet Thursday to talk about his future.
We'll be determining what's going on. We want to have transparency, we want to have openness.
So much at stake because Rosenstein oversees Robert Mueller's Russian meddling investigation, a firewall between Mueller and President Trump. The latest trouble began Friday with a New York Times report that Rosenstein suggested secretly taping the president or even invoking the 25th Amendment to declare him unfit for office. Rosenstein called the story absolutely false. But over the weekend, according to people close to him, he wondered if he was compromised and should step down and called White House counsel Don McGahn to talk about his future. Some Fox News commentators who Mr. Trump listens to urged against firing.
I have a message for the president tonight. Under zero circumstances should the president fire anybody.
After today's meeting, White House Chief of Staff John Kelly took the unusual step of walking Rosenstein outside and shaking hands in view of the cameras. It's an unsettled time here. Rosenstein's future is in doubt, and there are growing signs that Attorney General Jeff Sessions will step down after the November elections. Pete Williams, NBC News at the Justice Department.
All right, let's bring in our chief White House correspondent, Hallie Jackson. Hallie, you've got Rosenstein at the White House.
Right.
Kavanaugh will be on the Hill. I used the term split screen earlier in the broadcast. Another one.
A big day on Thursday with some potentially big risks and maybe rewards for President Trump. On Judge Kavanaugh, court battles, remember, can be a motivating factor for conservatives. So if Kavanaugh can hang on to this nomination, that might come into play for Republicans come the midterms. But on Thursday, if key Republican senators like Susan Collins find Christine Blasey Ford compelling and credible, that could sink Kavanaugh's chances. On Rod Rosenstein, there is almost no political upside for the president in getting rid of him. It is basically all risk. And that is why you're seeing even some of the president's closest allies saying, hey, hold off, don't do anything here.
All right, Hallie, thank you. Good to have you here. President Trump is in New York tonight ahead of his speech tomorrow before the United Nations General Assembly. It will be the first time he has addressed the world body since pulling out of the Iran nuclear deal, a deal international inspectors say Iran has complied with. I spoke with Iran's President Hassan Rouhani about that and the crippling U.S. sanctions he faces in an exclusive interview today. And I asked him if he planned to meet with Mr. Trump this week.
There is no such program for a meeting. Mr. Trump did not create conditions necessary to bring about the atmosphere conducive to a meeting.
Mr. President, you and all of us witnessed the United States President Trump, travel to Singapore and sit down with Kim Jong-un, a country that does have nuclear weapons. I'm curious how you viewed that meeting and if there is somewhere a model in there that might broach an opening for dialogue between Iran and the United States.
The North Korean model cannot be a correct model because we cannot draw such comparisons. This is in the hands of the Trump administration for it to cease its threatening behavior towards Iran.
The U.S. is reimposing sanctions it says are meant to force Iran to stop its missile development and end support for terror groups. The U.S. has made it clear that it wants to bring your oil exports down to zero. Do you think that will happen, and how will you respond if it does?
The United States is not capable of bringing our oil exports to zero. This is an empty promise, and it's a threat that is empty of credibility.
Some of the statements from Iranian officials have given the impression that Iran might move to shut down the Strait of Hormuz, to block all exports from the Persian Gulf. Is that something that you would consider?
If the United States wishes to use force in order to sanction the petroleum industry of Iran, it will certainly see the appropriate response. We do have the power to secure our own waterways and keep our waterways free.
Is that a warning to the Trump administration? Should they take that as a warning?
This is not a warning, this is a reality. If the Persian Gulf waterway, which is to remain free and secure, it must remain so for everyone.
Rouhani told me Iran will remain in the nuclear deal as long as the other countries in the accord hold up their ends of the bargain. Now to Judgment Day for Bill Cosby, the disgraced icon, now convicted felon, set to be sentenced for drugging and sexually assaulting a woman at his home. The 81-year-old Cosby faces potentially the rest of his life in prison. And NBC's Stephanie Gosk is at the courthouse with more.
For the once beloved Bill Cosby, prison could be his next act. Guilty of 3 counts of aggravated indecent assault, today prosecutors asked the judge to sentence the 81-year-old to 5 to 10 years behind bars. It's the first high-profile criminal case decided during the Me Too movement. The defense team asking the court not to let public pressure influence the sentence. Cosby's lawyers say their client should be placed under house arrest because of his age and poor health. Andrea Constand, the former Temple employee who testified that Cosby assaulted her in his home in 2004, chose not to give an emotional statement, but her parents and her sister did. Gianna Constand, her mother, said, "I worry about my daughter. I live in fear of her physical and mental state of mind." While her father told the court, "There is a dark cloud forever hanging over my head." The DA pointed to Cosby's lack of remorse, telling the judge he seemingly doesn't think he has done anything wrong.
They will be back here again tomorrow with one defense witness left to testify. Whatever the sentence, Cosby's defense team says they will file an appeal. Stephanie Gosk, NBC News, Norristown, Pennsylvania.
A Dallas police officer was fired today, weeks after she shot and killed a man in his apartment, mistaking the unit as her own. The firing comes on the heels of mounting outrage from the victim's family. NBC's Gabe Gutierrez has the latest.
Today, the Dallas Police Department announced Officer Amber Geiger had been fired. The move comes as outrage mounted after the shooting death earlier this month of 26-year-old Botham John in his own apartment.
We only believe that the right thing to do was to fire this officer.
Geiger says she entered the apartment thinking it was hers, saw a large silhouette, drew her gun, and gave verbal commands before shooting. But Jean's family attorneys dispute that, saying witnesses heard her banging on the door, demanding to get inside. There was growing tension in Dallas after the release of a search warrant showing several items seized from Jean's apartment, including marijuana. Tonight, at Jean's funeral in his home country of St. Lucia, an outpouring of grief.
Our son, you have gone in body, but you'll always remain with us forever.
Geiger remains out on bail and is now out of a job. Gabe Gutierrez, NBC News.
The FBI has joined the urgent search for a missing boy with special needs in North Carolina. We want to share what we know. Police say 6-year-old Maddox Rich was last seen by his father and another adult Saturday at a park in Gastonia, east of Charlotte. According to officials, Maddox has autism and he is nonverbal. Police are asking anyone with information to come forward. Now to an NBC News exclusive with music publicist Rob Goldstone, who set up that infamous Trump Tower meeting between Trump officials and a Russian lawyer, promising dirt on Hillary Clinton in 2016. Tonight, a rare look inside the Mueller grand jury room as Goldstone tells senior investigative correspondent Cynthia McFadden what it was like for him to testify.
It's terrifying, even if you believe you've done absolutely nothing wrong.
No lawyer.
No lawyer. You know, I was picked up by 2 FBI agents and driven to an underground entrance.
How big's the room?
The room is like a lecture room in a college.
The 23 grand jurors?
Most of them, I would say, they range probably from late 20s, early 30s to their 50s. Black, white, Latino.
And what did Mueller's team want to make sure those grand jurors heard? All about President Trump's relationship to a powerful Russian family, the Agalarovs.
They were introduced to me by people that knew them as the Trumps of Russia.
The billionaire pop star Emin Agalarov became Goldstone's client. Goldstone brokered a deal between the 2 families to bring the Miss Universe pageant to Moscow in 2013.
Let's meet the beautiful contestants.
Where, he says, he saw Mr. Trump charm a room full of powerful Russians.
One guest asked him what his views were on the very well-publicized Greek bailout. Mr. Trump stood up and said, "Before I answer that, have any of you heard of The Apprentice?" And he talked for about 7 minutes about how amazing it was, how amazing he was, and got a standing ovation. And I just thought, this is genius. He probably doesn't even know where Greece is. He seemed to like the fact that he was adored there.
Fast forward to 2016. It was the Aguilerovs who asked Goldstone to arrange a meeting with the Trump campaign to receive dirt from the Russian government about Hillary Clinton. The Aguilerovs denied that the Russian government asked them to do it. In fact, Goldstone says no dirt on Clinton was provided.
But it was a dirty offer.
Yes.
It was a dirty offer that they accepted.
Yes, that is true. That didn't materialize, but yes, it's the willingness to accept it.
And that, Goldstone says, was a central focus for the grand jury. Cynthia McFadden, NBC News, New York.
Still ahead as we continue tonight, the shocking video. Kids as young as 11 behind the wheel of a school bus, the driver egging them on. Also shrinking airline seats, the new battle that's erupted over your space in the sky. All right, we're back now with parents' outrage in Indiana after shocking video emerged of a school bus driver letting 3 children get behind the wheel and drive the bus. The youngest just 11 years old. That driver has now been fired, and we get details from Miguel Almaguer.
It's all good, it's all good. I'm letting her stop and Michael stop.
This is the video taken by students that police and parents could not believe. That's a child behind the wheel of an Indiana school bus driving other students to their stop as their driver not only watches but appears to help.
Okay. First, we gotta do, put your foot on the brake.
The tiniest tyke behind the wheel, just 11 years old. But police say Joandria McAtee also let a 13 and a 17-year-old drive part of her route in rural Porter County.
It's terrifying. I mean, that bus driver put 30 to 40 kids at risk.
Tonight, the school district says it's angered and disappointed in the actions of this driver who was fired. Police charge McAtee with felony neglect.
Anything could have happened to not only the kids on the bus, but a pedestrian or another car coming by.
With the bus service provider assuring parents children are safe, a job listing says no experience is necessary for new drivers. We train. This is not what anyone had in mind. Miguel Almaguer, NBC News.
All right, we'll take a break. Coming up, sick of feeling the squeeze in the sky? The new fight over giving you more legroom on your flight. If you're tired of tying yourself into a pretzel just to squeeze into an ever-shrinking airline seat, then having the person in front of you recline their seat right into your lap, help could be on the way. Congress is now considering ordering the FAA to set minimum legroom and seat size standards. NBC's Tom Costello tells us more.
Rows 20 through 35, they'd love to see you here at
That boarding process these days feels a lot more like a cattle call. More people squeezing and twisting into tiny seats. Less room for elbows, legs, and backsides.
The planes are more crowded. Everybody's uptight. It's not a pleasant experience.
Airline seats have been shrinking for years, from 35 inches down to 30 inches and less today. A reclining passenger can make it impossible to read a book or newspaper. Now, Congress is considering ordering the FAA to set minimum airline seat sizes and legroom, prohibit airlines from bumping passengers who've already boarded, even regulate so-called service animals.
A lot of it comes down to plain and simple comfort, but number one should be safety. If we can't get out during an emergency evacuation, then people are really in trouble.
Under FAA rules, every passenger must be able to evacuate within 90 seconds. If the FAA does start regulating legroom and seats, it will likely take years of working out the rules before we see any changes. Tom Costello, NBC News, Washington.
Up next, Inspiring America, the big advance allowing patients to do what they've been told they would never do again. Finally, hopeful news for the more than 1 million Americans who are paralyzed. It's a triumph of modern medicine for patients determined to do what once seemed impossible. Our Rahema Ellis has more in tonight's Inspiring America.
Jeff Marquis was an avid mountain biker until an accident 7 years ago left him paralyzed from the chest down. But look at him now. He's taking small steps, which are a giant leap forward in his independence. Now able to walk 100 yards with help and live on his own.
Gradually, more and more, I can do more of it myself.
Today, researchers from the University of Louisville and the Mayo Clinic report 5 paralyzed patients taking steps for the first time, made possible by a device implanted on the spine that wakes up the nerves so they can function again after intense physical training.
It shows recovery can happen even years after injury.
How would you characterize this?
I would characterize it as breathtaking. It gives incredible hope to people.
Our honored guest, Christopher Reeve.
20 years after Christopher Reeve was left paralyzed, it seemed far-fetched that anyone with such a catastrophic injury could ever walk again.
And the stepping's still going okay?
Yep.
But for Jeff and millions of other patients,
I'm not gonna stop. I'll keep going.
it's now a dream within reach. Rahima Ellis, NBC News, New York.
And researchers say with more testing, this device could be available to a lot more patients in just a few years. That's Nightly News for this Monday. I'm Lester Holt. For all of us at NBC News, thank you for watching and good night.